Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we're diving into something that's absolutely exploding in the business world and something that's definitely going to be relevant for all of you UPSC aspirants getting ready for current events. We're talking about quick commerce. It seems like it's popping up everywhere these days, and I think understanding how it all works and the different nuances could really give you an edge in your exam prep.
Absolutely. Quick commerce, or as it's often called Q-commerce, it's a lot more than just like speedy deliveries.
Mhm.
It really represents this like fundamental shift in how we're shopping and even how businesses are operating these days.
Okay, so let's break it down a little bit here for everybody listening in. We're talking about deliveries in under an hour, sometimes even like 10 or 20 minutes, right? But what makes that kind of speed even possible? I keep hearing about these dark stores. What are those all about?
Yeah, those dark stores you're hearing about, they're basically like mini warehouses, but they're strategically located closer to consumers. Think of them like little hubs for all these quick commerce platforms that are popping up like Blinkit, Zepto, Swiggy Instamart, all those. By having these dark stores so close, they can fulfill orders so fast.
So it's like having a whole supermarket right there around the corner, but just for online orders.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense for the whole speed thing. But what about all the tech behind it? How do these platforms actually manage such quick turnaround times? Like, how does that even work?
Well, a big part of it is data analysis. These platforms are using all that customer data and they can really personalize the whole shopping experience. They can like predict demand and optimize inventory, even suggest products you might want based on what you bought before.
Wow, so it's not just about speed, it's about creating this really tailored experience.
Ah,
Super interesting. I wonder, what does all this mean for brands,
yeah.
especially with all this focus on efficiency and, personalized service and things like that?
For brands, quick commerce has a ton of advantages, actually. Obviously, there's that enhanced brand awareness. That's a big one. It also gives them access to a workforce that's really low cost through that gig economy model that's often used for deliveries. And maybe most importantly, it gives them this cost-effective distribution channel.
Could you go into a little more detail about that? What do you mean?
Sure. Think of it this way. Brands, especially those dealing with perishable goods like groceries and produce, they can save a ton of money on logistics and storage costs. Instead of investing a lot in their own infrastructure, they can just use the network of dark stores and all the delivery fleets from these quick commerce platforms.
Ah, so it's a win-win for the platforms and the brands. No wonder this market is growing so fast. I think I read somewhere that it's going to be a nearly $10 billion market by 2029. Something crazy like that.
That's exactly right. The market right now is about $3.34 billion, but it's projected to grow like almost 76% year on year in the next fiscal year alone. It's pretty wild to see how much the whole retail landscape is changing.
Yeah, that kind of growth has to be shaking things up for sure. What about traditional retailers? How are they responding to this whole quick commerce boom?
There's definitely some unease, I would say, among traditional retailers. A lot of them are worried about anti-competitive practices from these new platforms,
Yeah.
particularly something called predatory pricing.
Predatory pricing. I'm not sure everyone knows what that means. Can you break that down a little?
Of course, predatory pricing basically means that a company, usually one with a lot of money to throw around, sells its products way below cost just to undercut the competition and gain market share. It can really hurt smaller businesses who just can't keep up with those kinds of losses.
So are quick commerce platforms doing this? Is that what you're saying?
There have been some allegations, yes. There's a concern that because they have access to so much venture capital and foreign investment, that they can take those initial losses and just play the long game.
So it ends up being this huge David versus Goliath situation where the traditional retailers are really struggling to compete with these platforms that have such deep pockets. It really raises some concerns about fairness and whether everyone is playing by the same rules.
I think that's a valid point. And there's also worry about something called differential pricing. It's where these platforms use your data to charge different prices for the exact same product, and that's based on things like your location, what device you're using, even your past shopping habits.
Whoa, that sounds like a problem, especially for consumer rights and just basic transparency. Seems like all this speed and convenience might be coming with some hidden costs attached.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And that brings us to another really important point, the whole question of regulation. In 2023, India actually took a step towards addressing some of these concerns, and they issued guidelines to try and prevent these deceptive practices by quick commerce platforms, advertisers, and sellers.
Well, that's good to hear. But are those guidelines really enough to ensure fair competition and to protect consumers and these traditional retailers? I mean, are they really going to make a difference?
Well, that's a big question. Enforcing these kinds of guidelines can be really tricky, especially because these companies are constantly coming up with new ways to do business and new tactics. It's kind of like a cat and mouse game where the regulators are always trying to catch up. So yeah, we were talking about those guidelines that were put in place, trying to regulate things a little bit. They're definitely like a first step, but actually making sure they work, that's a whole other can of worms, you know?
Yeah, that's a good point. What are some of the biggest challenges when it comes to regulation, especially in an industry that moves so fast and is always changing?
Well, I think one of the hardest parts is that these platforms are constantly evolving. It's like every day they have some new business model or a new strategy, and it makes it really hard for regulators to keep up, you know? It really is like this cat and mouse game where the regulators are always a few steps behind.
So it's like they're constantly trying to stay ahead of the curve, those regulators. But what are they really focused on? Like, what are the specific things they're looking at?
Transparency is a huge one.
Mm,
The guidelines, they're trying to make sure everything is really clear for consumers. Like, is the pricing up front? Are the ads honest? And are the apps designed in a way that's easy to understand and doesn't try to trick people into spending more money than they wanted to? Things like that.
okay, yeah, that makes sense. Consumers need to have all the information if they're going to make good decisions, especially when it comes to online shopping. But I'm curious about the bigger picture here. Beyond the immediate stuff like competition and consumer rights, how is this whole quick commerce thing changing our society? What kind of impact is it having?
That's a really important question. I think the rise of quick commerce shows how much we're moving towards this idea of wanting everything instantly, instant gratification. We're just getting more and more used to getting what we want exactly when we want it.
And while that can be really nice and convenient, I do wonder if there's some downsides.
Mm.
Could this need for everything to be instant make us less patient? Like, could it affect our ability to plan ahead or to even appreciate things that take a little time and effort?
It's something to think about for sure. This I want it now mentality that quick commerce kind of encourages could definitely make us a lot less tolerant of delays or any kind of setbacks. We might get used to everything happening so fast that anything slower just feels frustrating.
It's so interesting how something like getting your groceries delivered quickly can actually change how we think and behave as a whole society. It's kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, and it's not just about how we act as individuals. Think about what it does to cities. All those delivery drivers on the roads, more traffic, more worries about pedestrian safety, even just the fact that people might stop going to regular stores as much, that all affects how cities are planned and how they function. It's a lot to consider.
And we can't forget about the people doing all those deliveries. Quick commerce relies so much on those gig workers, and it really raises questions about whether they're being treated fairly and paid a living wage. The whole gig economy can be pretty unpredictable and unstable for workers.
Exactly. Quick commerce could actually lead to more and more people having jobs that don't offer a lot of security, Inconsistent paychecks, no benefits, always worried about whether they'll have work next week. It's a tough situation for a lot of people.
So we've got potential impacts on how we behave, how our cities work, how people earn a living. It really shows how far-reaching this whole quick commerce thing can be. But where do we go from here? What do you think the future holds for this industry?
Well, it's hard to say for sure, but with how things are going and how much people want things to be easy and convenient, I think it's pretty safe to say quick commerce is sticking around.
But will it keep growing at this crazy fast pace, or are there things that might slow it down? What do you think?
Oh, there are definitely some bumps in the road ahead. We talked about those regulations and the ethical concerns. And then you've got practical challenges like traffic jams in cities and the environmental impact of all those delivery vehicles going around. It all adds up.
And let's not forget the money side of things.
Yeah.
I bet investors might start getting a little more careful, especially as the initial excitement around quick commerce starts to fade a bit.
You're absolutely right. We're already seeing some of the smaller companies struggling to keep up, and they might end up getting bought out by the bigger ones. It's going to be interesting to see how things shake out. My guess is the platforms that succeed in the long run are going to be the ones who figure out how to grow responsibly. They'll have to balance making money with doing things ethically and really taking into account all the different stakeholders involved.
That makes me think about the role technology is going to play in all of this. I mean, we're already seeing things like robots in warehouses, and those drone delivery systems are starting to pop up. What's next?
Oh, technology is going to be huge, no doubt. Just imagine a world where you order something and a drone drops it off at your doorstep a few minutes later. It's like something out of a movie, but it could really happen. And if it does, it'll change everything.
It does sound pretty futuristic, but who knows? Maybe it's closer than we think. But even with all that cool tech coming up, those big questions are still there, right? How do we make sure quick commerce is good for everyone, not just a few companies or people? How do we make sure it's fair and sustainable and ethical? It's a lot to figure out.
You're right. Those are the questions we need to keep asking as this whole industry keeps changing and growing.
Okay, so before we go on to our final thoughts on quick commerce, let's take a minute to recap what we talked about. We went into all the details about how these regulations are supposed to work. We talked about the idea of instant gratification and what that means for society. And we looked at how quick commerce is affecting cities and workers and the role technology is going to play in all of this. It's a lot to take in.
It really is. So many different angles to consider.
And for those of you out there studying for the UPSC exams, this is exactly the kind of deep thinking and analysis you need to be doing. Quick commerce isn't just some business trend. It's like this window into how our society and our economy and our technology are all changing and connecting. You really have to think critically, connect all the dots, and come up with your own conclusions and opinions. That's what's going to make you stand out.
That's great advice. You have to look at things from different perspectives and really think things through. That's going to help you so much when you're preparing for the UPSC exams.
Now, before we wrap up, I just want to remind everyone listening that all the information we've been talking about today comes from a recent article in The Hindu. It's a great source for staying up to date on current events, and it's super helpful for all of you studying for the UPSC.
Definitely. The Hindu is really thorough, and they cover a lot of different topics that are important for the UPSC. It's a great resource.
All right, well, let's move on to our final thoughts and bring this discussion to a close. We'll be back in just a minute. Speak with us. Welcome back, everyone. So we've really dug deep into this whole quick commerce thing, from how it actually works to how it's affecting society and the economy. It's been a fascinating discussion.
No doubt about it. This isn't just some fad that's going to disappear. This is really changing how we shop and how we live our lives.
Absolutely. And as we wrap things up, I want to leave everyone listening, especially those of you studying hard for the UPSC exams, with something to really think about. We've talked about some of the potential downsides of quick commerce, like how it might affect those traditional retailers, the whole issue of data privacy and whether everyone's getting a fair price, and even the possibility that it could lead to job losses in the retail sector.
Yeah, those are all really important things to consider, no question about it. But it's important to remember that change, even when it's disruptive, can also bring new opportunities. Think about it. Quick commerce could create new jobs that we haven't even thought of yet. It could help boost local economies. And it definitely makes things a lot more convenient and accessible for consumers, especially people in areas that haven't had a lot of options before.
That's a really good point. It's not all doom and gloom, right?
Yeah.
It's about finding that sweet spot, figuring out how to make the most of this technology while minimizing the risks. It's a balancing act, for sure.
Exactly. And that means we need smart policies from the government, businesses need to act responsibly, and everyone needs to be aware of what's happening and get involved in the conversation. It's going to take all of us working together.
I couldn't agree more. And for our UPSC aspirants out there, this is where those critical thinking skills really come in. Don't just take everything at face value. Look at the information, think about the different perspectives, and come up with your own well-informed opinion. That's what's going to help you ace those exams.
That's right. Those UPSC exams aren't about just memorizing facts. They want to see that you can understand complex issues and think for yourself.
Well said. And there's really no better example than quick commerce to put those analytical skills to the test. It touches on everything from economics to technology, from social behavior to urban planning, even ethics. It's all connected.
It really is. It's like this little snapshot of all the challenges and all the amazing possibilities we're facing in the world today.
So as you learn more about this topic, really think about the big picture, the long-term consequences of quick commerce. How will it affect India's economic growth? What about its social fabric and how it's changing how we use technology? How can we make sure that everyone benefits from this growth, not just a select few? How can we make sure that innovation is happening responsibly? These are the kinds of questions that will not only make you smarter, but will actually prepare you to be a leader who can make a difference in the future.
Absolutely. It's not just about knowing things. It's about understanding them and then using that knowledge to do something good.
And on that note, we've come to the end of our deep dive into the world of quick commerce. I hope you all found it as interesting and eye-opening as we did. But remember, the conversation doesn't stop here. Keep learning, keep reading articles, keep researching different points of view, and keep forming your own opinions. That's how we grow.
That's right. Keep asking those questions, challenge those assumptions, and most importantly, don't be afraid to think differently.
And for all of you listening, especially our UPSC aspirants, we want to hear from you. Tell us what you think, what questions you have, what your predictions are for the future of quick commerce. Let's keep this conversation going in the comments.
We love hearing from all of you and learning from your insights.
And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into current events and other topics that really matter. We'll be back soon with another episode to help you stay informed and ahead of the game. Until then, keep learning and best of luck with your studies.
Best of luck with your preparation.
And one last reminder, all the information we discussed today came from a recent article in The Hindu. It's a fantastic resource for staying informed, and it's particularly useful for those of you preparing for the UPSC.
Couldn't agree more. The Hindu is an invaluable resource for any UPSC aspirant who wants to stay informed and develop a deeper understanding of the complex issues shaping our world.
All right, that's it for today. Thanks for joining us.